you have to start with the why question. Why are we doing this? What is our ultimate end goal? Because one of my mentors, Kristen Cox, says you don't confuse the means with the end, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so when we talk about that example of, okay, we're going to fail fast. Well, that's a capability. I mean, I guess you're trying to basically build a speed of development, right? That's sort of an organizational capability. Yeah. What are you gonna point that at, right? I think is what you're saying, right? Why do you want to do that? What's either the ultimate customer impact or organizational result that we're striving for here? That is the reason why we want to implement and develop fast.
My name is Heath Gascoigne. I am the host of the Business Transformation Podcast, and this is a show for business transformators who are part business strategists, part business designers, part collaborators, and part negotiators. Business transformators have moved past just business design and includes oversight of implementation of those business designs and business transformations, and includes stakeholder management, coordination, and negotiation. If you work in strategy development and implementation, and work to ensure that that strategy is aligned to the business design and technology, then you're probably a business transformator. This is a show where we speak to industry experts and professionals to share their stories, strategies, and insights to help you start, turn around, and grow your business transformation. Welcome to the Business Transformation Podcast. And in this episode, we are talking to one of those experts. We are talking to Jonathan Coneby. That's correct there, Jonathan?
Coneby. Close. It's a tough one.
That's American version. So I'm speaking the Kiwi version. Sorry there, buddy. Okay. So Jonathan is a lead consultant at Empathy Associates that deals with public sector transformations, all shapes and sizes. Jonathan has extensive experience in business transformation in the public sector, spending the last 5 years at the Texas Workforce Commission. Prior to that, a board of directors at another government organization in Texas. Jonathan is in the biggest state in the US right now, and so some of these organizations have had a huge number of employees. I think what we say 5,000 for
that's right.
The 5,000. Yeah, that's huge. I think I've done some transformations around 2,000, but 5,000 is massive. Previous roles include auditor and internal auditor, with again in the public sector, and for many. So you're like looking into the detail. So it goes way back to the turn of the century. So, Jonathan, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you. How are you?
Thank you, Heath. Doing really well. Really quite a pleasure to be on your podcast. You've got a great following, a diverse following, and I listened to a couple of videos before this, and it's exciting stuff. And just happy to contribute some perspectives. I might be a little counter cultural with some of the things that I say and use, because I've learned through the school of hard knocks that some of these techniques we think are the best don't end up being the best. So I have some unique perspectives on things that I hope to be able to contribute to your community, and really looking forward to hearing from you and your audience as well, and learning myself. Thank you.
Oh, very good. No, excellent. Awesome, Jennifer. I like what you see there about the frameworks, right? So I see that a lot where we'll get into some topics in a second, disagree on some topics. But yeah, the frameworks that I see, or people or practitioners that are in practice talking about or pushing a particular practice, some of those, I won't name any names, but the frameworks were intended for another purpose at some point in time. And now because of maybe the projects are quite big and seem to be complex, that they want some tried and tested framework of some time ago, but it was used for a different purpose. And now they've repurposed it and applying it as it was written for something else. And it's not quite living up to expectations. But for whatever reason, they are maybe sunk costs, or the time invested up until that point, they don't want to stop or pause or reflect and going, are we actually getting what we expected from this? And are we going at the pace we need? And it becomes a bit of a hard slog, and hence when it ultimately, which, the projects don't end very well, sadly. Yeah.
It's a good point. I mean, I think all of us should have our own framework. So there's no way to do our jobs without some type of framework. You can just go in there and wing it all the time, right? I mean, some people do, but but we need a framework. But I think it's good to be a little skeptical or a little, humble about the application, like you said. I mean, some environments work better than others. And, I think we fall in love with our tools sometimes when,
Yes.
we shouldn't do that, right? We should always adapt, always learn, always apply. I mean, I have a primary methodology of the theory of constraints. It's a very lesser known methodology, but even within that, I don't use everything, right? I pick and choose based on what works, and I use other concepts from other things. And so, it's a really good reminder to not fall in love with your tools.
No, they're very good. Yeah, and we have to talk about that theory of constraints. Yeah, I talk about that it's not so much the framework that is applied; it's the skill of the. And that's why I call ourselves business transformators, because the one is. I've been on programs where that you said, oh, you cannot use the name business architect anymore. So why's that? Oh, because they came in here, like they have one conversation with the team, with the division you're changing, they disappear for months and they reappear and they go, da-da, here's your target operating model. And the business is going, you got that from that one conversation that we had? Wow. Yeah. And so I said, no, it's not the framework that you use. It's actually the ability for the person doing the transformation, the one leading it, on the ability to apply it in two ways, appropriately for the situation and proportionately. It's like God to say to me, Heath, I read your book and I'm trying to apply it by the letter. And I was going, whoa, here's the thing. I said, thanks for reading the book. But, unless that framework, whether it's mine or someone else's, or even your own, was written specifically for that project, then apply it, 100%. Yeah. But most cases, it's not. And it's the key's in the name, framework. If it said policy or procedure, then you have no choice, because it's, that's procedure. That's the nature of procedures, that you follow the procedure. But a framework is, as you say correctly, I support that and I agree with it, is, you apply it, you pick what you need to.
You got to think. Right. Too often we don't actually think critically, right? Especially, I think we can fall into that trap with frameworks, is we apply it and we just keep applying like the textbook says. And, unfortunately you have to have some professional judgment every once in a while. And, that's good news for people like me. It's job security, right? I mean, it teaches us, where to look, where to think, but we have to actually still think, right? And think clearly. I've recently helped a client, and their first almost, and I had to said, we're now going to implement a new modus operandi of our mode of operation by default. Is their default mode of operation was that they will fail fast. And I said, so what I understand, I said, let's just try it. And I said, but the concept of just trying something is, I'm writing notes here on what we're saying here. There's some great quotes here you drop in there, Jonathan. So I want to play those back again later. So the mantra of fail fast is, we're not going to think, we're just going to do. And then what happens is, oh no, but we're failing fast. It's no, that's your excuse for not thinking. You need to think about why are you doing it in the first place? You've been told you need to do that, and the first thing you should say is why. That's the very first default is why. Yep. Question the question. Even question me. I'm not beyond question. You should question me. And if you can't question the question and you've been told to go to Google what they're just telling you, it's like, well, if you can't convince somebody on your argument in the room, in a couple of sentences, you got to wonder if you've been asked to implement it, because if they can't explain it, you're going to struggle with trying to live with what you've just delivered after they have left. Right. I think, Heath, you're spot on with that. And I experienced that in my profession as well, is you have to start with the why question. Why are we doing this? What is our ultimate end goal? Because, one of my mentors, Kristen Cox, says, you don't confuse the means with the end, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so when we talk about that example of, okay, we're going to fail fast, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a capability. I mean, I guess you're trying to basically build a speed of development, right? That's sort of an organizational capability. Yeah. What are you going to point that at, right? I think is what you're saying, right? Why do you want to do that? What's either the ultimate customer impact or organizational result that we're striving for here? That is the reason why we want to implement and develop fast, right? Yeah. But we don't go that far typically, right? We see, these things, like we want to increase our capability, but if we don't target the right things with those, you're not going to get the result. Sometimes if you go really slow, but you do the right thing, you'll get there faster. So another quote that I've heard is go slow to go fast. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think one of I was reading some of your materials earlier, and you had a quote in there that 70% of business transformations fail.
Yep.
Wow, that's an indictment, right? Not only is it a 50-50 coin toss, it's actually your net worse off typically, right? That should be unacceptable. I mean, our industry is doing harm, not good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I think that's a very important question. Why? Why do we want to do this? What is the ultimate goal we're striving for? And that'll tell us where we need to go. And if that means we do the right things, but methodically and slow, we're actually going to get there faster. It's the classic tortoise and the hare story, right?
Yeah.
Don't be the turtle, right? Not the rabbit that's racing around, doing a bunch of stuff and taking naps during the race or whatever. Slow and steady can sometimes be faster.
Oh yeah. Slow and steady wins the race. Yeah. They're like these old cliches, they're cliches for a reason. They stand the test of time, and they stand the test of time because they make sense. And they keep reappearing, and they go, oh, yeah, the old go slow to go fast. It's like, well, some people go, oh, no, I've got to move the rabbit and the hare, run 100 miles around the block. And meanwhile, the turtle, he takes his time and he gets their job done.
And don't get me wrong, Heath. I mean, I like to go fast too. So it reminds me of, sorry, I have another story, man. You're just getting all the stories out of me right away here. So I was with a client last week, and one of our sayings is in our engagements is start by stopping. So it kind of fits this theme, which is you guys are doing a whole bunch of stuff, right? Most of the time, my clients can't even write down all the stuff they're doing. They're doing so much stuff. So one of our first steps is, what can you stop doing? What can you pause, right? Yeah. All these things take organizational energy. Yeah. So let's create some space in the organization to work on what really matters. So we say, start by stopping. And it was funny because the executive director said, I hear what you're saying, but I also follow this, she follows someone else or reads a book and they say, start by starting. So I'm like conflicted. Do I stop by stopping or? Well, I think that is good though, right? If you do know what your why is, what your goal is, it absolutely don't be paralyzed with fear to go off and go and start creating and trying and piloting. And these things are healthy as long as they have the right orientation and perspective, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you can start by starting as long as it's the right thing, right?
Yes, in the right direction. Yeah. Okay. Actually, you talked about the organizations that you work with. So we should probably talk about our topics, right?
Oh, maybe we should get to that.
Yeah. So that was my fault. We got into the conversation pretty quickly. So having a long background and now in a consultancy that specializes in public sector transformations, all shapes and sizes. So let's I like to stick to 3 points. So it's easy for both us, but also the listeners can listen, whether we're on listening audio only or watching it on YouTube. So in terms of the transformations coming into these public sector, which is, I'm sure that the amount of spend on these programs is probably, some of the programs I've been brought on to, they talk about the budgets in fractions of billions of dollars, billions of pounds in the UK here. So they're not small. And the number of stakeholders they impact, one of the first ones I've done here impacted almost the whole country. And talk about rolling out insurance and transforming the insurance industry. What sort of insurance policies have you got? Well, everything from life, death, your animals, to specialty business, so that everyone is impacted by these insurance. So these projects they reach far and wide. So from yourself there, having been a specialist expert in public sector, what are they doing right now in terms of public sector and transformation projects? Have they got it right? Are they, what are they doing well? What are they not doing well? Is there a process that you follow? Number two, and so you come in, you've done it a few times. Something that we talk about frameworks. Is there something you like to use? And then number three is the key conditions or elements that you like that are need to be present or should be present when you're doing these transformations, you go, okay, this is a telltale sign that if we get this, it's going to be happy days. If we don't get that, we need to work to try and get it.
Perfect. I love those questions. Are you ready to dig in? I took some notes. I'm ready to talk about it. So your first question, what are the organizations doing right or wrong when I come in? What do I see? What's the state of the industry, so to speak? So I would first say that I think what they're doing right, and not everyone has this perspective, but I think the assumption that I've come to find is true is that people are good.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Public sector organizations. I've run across a couple of bad apples here and there. But at the end of the day, they care deeply.
Yeah.
Right. These are people who are committed to their mission and have a lot of passion about this. So I think that's what they do right. They're mission oriented, which can be an incredible advantage, of course, with staff and everything else. There's kind of a sense of the greater good, right? You had mentioned working on projects that affected, the whole nation in some cases. And that's an incredible source of motivation, right? So I've found a lot of value in it, knowing that my work contributes to helping real people with real problems.
Yeah.
So I think that these organizations can always demonstrate mission orientation and perspective. The motivations are good.
So that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing well. They come from a good place.
They come from a good place. They're trying their best out there. And I guess that's a good lead into what are they not doing well?
Yeah.
I think I see a lot of organizations struggling, right? And maybe it's selection bias because we're brought into organizations who need help, right?
Yeah,
we don't always see the world-class organizations, right?
Yep.
But typically what I see is that they're just, totally overloaded. I don't know if this is too different in the private sector. You guys let me know in the feedback to this podcast, but typically they're 100% overloaded.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And they have many different stakeholders who have input into what they do, right? And they all want their own things to be fixed. Yeah. And which drives the organization to launch even more things, right? Yes. To try to satisfy all the stakeholders and all the demands. And the demands are great in the public sector, right? You have people calling like the governor's office, and I don't know what the equivalent is in your area or your audience's area, but many different oversight bodies who have legitimate authority to provide feedback, and it can be a crush, right? So the leadership of a public sector organization has an incredible job to do because they have all these different forces that want to try to have an opinion, and they have to protect the organization from that, right? Like they're like the gatekeeper of all of this, right? They have to put it all together, and that can be overwhelming. I personally have never done that. I've never been an executive director of a large agency before, but I can imagine what that's like.
Yeah.
And so that's what we typically find is well-intentioned people who are totally overwhelmed, which means they're doing too much at once. And the only way they know how to get out of that is to just keep trying more and more, launching more and more things, which of course, burns out the organization, right?
Oh yeah. No good come of it.
So that's typically what we find. So typically we see strategies that are really complicated, really complex. I see that what their ambition is, or their why, as you put it, is often vague. They don't they haven't clearly articulated what they want the result to be at the end of the day. And they focus on the means and not the end, right? They focus on, I'm going to create a better culture. I'm going to transform my technology. I'm going to implement an agile mindset. These are all good things within their own, for their own uses. Right. But if they're not connected with that why, then, people aren't going to have the context to implement them correctly.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So that's typically what I find.
Okay. So we've got great people. Overwhelmed. The solution out of it for them, they think, is to do even more. And so you come in for as new fresh eyes. So what are you people also, and with what I've seen, you've got almost, they won't say it themselves, but lifers. There's guys that have been in the organization for the most of their adult life, straight from high school, right. 20 years plus. And so they not only, very experienced in the space they're in, but they are really attached to it. And so in terms of changing it, it's like, well, this is what we've done it. This is the way we do it. So how is that an issue, and how do you overcome that?
Definitely. These people that you're talking about in organizations that have been there, for a long time, I call them the historians of the organization. Right?
Historians. Historians.
Right. We actually need those people present in an engagement, because they're like, excuse my language, but they're like the BS people. Like, they can call BS. Right?
Yeah. That's it.
Like, oh yeah, we tried that, 15 years ago and it didn't work. And, so we actually need those people in an engagement, because first of all, they can tell you everything wrong with your solution, which if you can preempt those things, that's gold, right?
Oh yeah.
So they provide, even if it's a negative always second guessing things, they actually provide a lot of yes, buts, we call them. Yes, but you haven't thought about this. Right.
Yeah.
And if you can engage those people, understand their hesitations, and actually build that into the solution, then you're going to be more successful, first of all. Yep. But second of all, if you don't engage those people, they're going to continue to resist, and even more so. Right. They're going to, I've really not seen too many examples of this, but some people will just try to sabotage the whole thing. Right. Because you're not, they've been there, done that. They've seen 100 consultants come in and nothing's really changed for them. Right. So why should they believe you? So first of all, we should embrace these mentalities. I mean, there needs to be some ground rules, right? I mean, they can't just run the whole thing, but we need to engage these people. But I would say the hard thing is, how do you convince them that you're just not another person coming in and stirring up the pot, right?
Yeah, here comes another consultant. Why are you different to the last guys? Yeah.
Right. And I would say there's some techniques and things that we do that help, keep that, manageable. And one is we seek to do win-win solutions, right? We never want to do a win-lose solution in our engagement, right? And so typically, and Stephen Covey, I love his materials. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he reminds us that always strive for a win-win.
Yes.
Too
it's
often,
one of his 7 habits, right?
Yeah. 7 habits of highly effective people is always seek a win-win. For some reason, our brains are wired to think that it's a zero-sum game, that in order for me to win, something else has to lose.
Yeah.
Right. And we default to that all the time. And I do it every day. Right. I mean, it's just kind of how we think the world works. But often there's so much improvement opportunity for win-wins. We just have to be looking for it.
Yeah. You seek and you'll find. Yeah.
Yep. So you have to go into it with that type of mindset. And so mindset is really key in these engagements. Whenever we go in, we're not, the sole source of ideas and improvement. We teach some principles, and then we apply as a group, and then we go into implementation and on through that kind of framework. And so we try to teach some of these mindset pieces first. And so we are always seeking win-win. Those people have the opportunity to raise the red flag and say, no, that's not going to work for me. Right. And we'll try to address that. And then, so those are some of the techniques. And I think also starting with the why, starting with the goal, that's the first thing we talk about as well in our engagements is what's our goal? We have to be very clear on what the goal is here, so that we know what we're striving for, first of all. And we know what the problem is, right? My mentor, Kristen Cox, says a problem is only a problem in the context of a goal. Right. For an organization, right? There's problems everywhere, but which problems should we solve? The ones that are holding us back from achieving that why or that goal. And so if those skeptics see that we have the right orientation, we have a clear goal, and that we're willing to hear all the perspectives on the actual solution itself and to build that into implementation, by and large, you address their concerns. And, you have to give these people, the benefit of the doubt. And then if they keep resisting, then that becomes a leadership issue that leadership has to go address, right?
Yeah, well, it comes to your first point. You said that people by nature, naturally are good people, by nature.
Yeah, that's what I believe. And even if you don't believe it, it's a really good assumption to have. And if it doesn't bear out, then at least you tried, right? And you probably addressed most of the people's concerns in that way.
Yeah, I think if you went in, there's two, people are motivated by two things, either the gain of pleasure or avoiding pain. So if you went in there with the stick to beat them with the stick and try to motivate them, and then they go, no, I'm just going to respond with another stick. Or if you, with the why, you motivate them with the why, like with a client that I helped recently, they've gone straight out to RFP, and then talk about defining the problem first. They've gone out to RFP to provide a solution, a provider for the end game that they've already picked before they've understood the current state. And they can't get any business engagement to come and be involved in the demos. And so now they're offering to pay vouchers for the people to attend. And I said, the only reason you're offering people to pay is because now they know that it's naturally painful for what they're going through. So you're trying to lessen the pain. And so you're trying to motivate them by the carrot. And by the stick. And so what you should have done is the starting point, the why. You should have created a why that's so aspirational for them. They would answer the what's in it for me. And they go, yeah, I want to be a part of that. I want to contribute. And so when you send out requests for attending these demos, you'll get hundreds because they want to be a part of it. But you've gone into solution mode, into the deep. I say, whoa, what's going on here?
I've never heard of that technique of paying a voucher. That's impressive. Yeah, imagine if you just spend a day with someone on the front line to see how their current software or whatever it is working, right? And, oh, hey, I see you. It takes you this long to enter this, or it always glitches out. Hey, we want to solve that for you, right? Why don't you come to this demo to see if this is something that'll work?
Yeah.
So crazy. That's a crazy story. I wish I had that tool. I don't know if most government organizations, I don't know if we can pay people like that. But that, it's one way to do it.
Yeah. Well, in the end, I advise that they probably don't do that. That doesn't create an environment where there's that people can just cross their arms and go, if we wait long enough, we'll get vouchers coming our way. And so that's the wrong kind of motivation. Yeah,
that's interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So we got I like the historians. We'd call them over here, and we'd call them lifers.
Lifers.
But that's not a derogatory term. That's like the same point as these guys know the culture, and they are really like your litmus test. You that's your first point of call. Like I'm fortunate with the current client helping now that there's quite a lot of seasoned professionals and so in the building. It's like, oh great, we've got them available as as not just SMEs but also seconded to the program full time. Like, oh amazing, we're going to run past all the ideas, what we're coming up with and what we see past them as the first test. And then, that's going to pass that's your point, the sniff test, the BS test. It's like, if we can't pass the BS with these guys, forget it.
Absolutely. And they'll also, if you can engage them, they'll then help you change the culture of the agency, right? They're going to help convince others if they believe it too. So there's big change management implications of doing this right or wrong, right?
Yeah. So they become the change champions. Yeah. Okay, good one. So that's what the pros and cons of the things you look forward when you go into a program, and then you got some range of techniques there that you apply when you see that set the goal from the beginning. You want to see if there's any red flags. You want to make sure that you talk through those, address them, and those include those as part of your solution. But the key part, and I think it's overlooked, and most of these programs, if I'm not mistaken, or my ones particularly, that I can speak to, although they are labelled business transformation, but they have a high degree of technology involved as part of the enabler of the solution. And so, and it's interesting to hear that I'd imagine from although we're in different continents and different parts of the world, that yes, technology features quite a lot in these business transformation programs. but it's not just technology that is part of the change. It's a big part of it, if not a lot of it, is on the people aspect. And when you talk about mindset, that is the people part. And you know, like where we are right. Well, we're helping a client, and they say, look, we're just swapping out this old system for a new one. And I said, so what does the business think? And they'll say, well, the business don't care. I said, what do you mean? You've got people that have been here for 20 years. They definitely care if they've been here for 20. If they wouldn't have lasted 2 years, let alone 20, they absolutely care. But that people element seems to be missing in these programs where the focus is on the technology. Have you had that?
Absolutely. I mean, I usually, or not usually, but often we're brought in because of a technology implementation failure, actually. Right. So I don't know what the technology industry has done to receive such a favorable standing in the world, but people run to technology. Right. And I think, you know, in some parts it's because technology can be a force for good, an incredible force for good, right? If it's done well. But also I think people sometimes want kind of a shortcut, right? And they know they do what they know, right? And they hear about new systems, new technology, new capabilities, right? And they go to that. But to your point, maybe they're not engaging the organization in this. It's really, you know, my perspective in our engagements is not a heavy technology focus. It's a secondary focus. It's a tool, right? It's a tool in the organization. And sometimes there's incredible opportunity to use that tool. And sometimes there's not so much, right? I've done entire engagements where actually we didn't change the technology either at all, or we actually reduced its functionality because it wasn't working very well. Right. And so, we come from the perspective of, again, what's that why? What's the goal? Let's be very clear on that. Then what's holding back this organization from achieving that? Right. And if technology is in that picture, wonderful. But if it's not, then we're going to be mature enough to not run to that tool. Right. And use other things to help the organization get there. One quick story. There was a function that I helped out with about a year ago. They had this new technology implementation. It allowed customers to, you know, do more self-service, do these things, very customer friendly, whereas the old system was very antiquated in other things. So in a lot of respects, it was a big upgrade. Right. Problem was the way they implemented it. Completely wrecked the organization. And here's why. Before, they had a manual intake process, right? That staff would take something, review it, decide if it's sufficient, right? If it has everything it needs, and then send it to the appropriate resource. And so they decided to automate that through the new system, and the system had capabilities, right? That would allow that. And the problem was, it just ended up being a card dealer, right? So something would come in and it would just automatically assign it in a random fashion to staff. And also, Heath, unfortunately, that was implemented right before the pandemic, where this program's demand went about 8,000% higher than it ever has been in the past, right? So what do you think happened? Automated distribution to a set sort of resources. In an incredible environment of demand. I mean, I didn't ever do the calculations, but let me tell you, it was like 8,000% increase in demand.
Through the roof.
The people had 5,000 things assigned to them, and they didn't know what to do every day when they walked into work. Right.
Froze.
And so was that piece of technology the problem? No, probably not. It was the way that we implemented it. It was not married to a good business process and a good set of procedures and mindsets. Right. It was just off the shelf, slap it in, and let's do the best we can and let's move on. And it just wasn't done in a good way. So
implementation.
Implementation is key. Right. And I am a bit of a skeptic when it comes to a lot of technology capabilities. So I'm going to be a little bit different than a lot of your audience today. And I'm not in the high tech space very often. So I would love to see really great examples of, you know, incredible technologies transforming businesses. But I haven't seen much of that, right? It's actually been the simple solutions and sometimes aided by technology that have made incredible impacts.
There's a well-kept secret in business transformation that no one is talking about, and that's 70% of business transformations fail, wasting time, money, and missed opportunities. There are 4 common causes of project failure: lack of business user involvement, lack of senior leadership support, changing requirements, and incomplete requirements. Clients, however, don't know this, and more importantly, they don't know what to do. They're either told they need reams and reams of beautiful PowerPoint presentations, but they're really just marketing documents. Marketing for the consultancy to convince you of the more work they will bill you for. They are just designed to run up the billable hours, or they're told to send their staff off to do training to get certified in old, outdated methods that result in 70% failure. Clients know if they bring in the Big 4, they will get a Big 4 bill and no transformation. They load the project up with junior staff that produce interesting but useless documentation that they will tell you it is needed, that is full of jargon and the latest buzzwords. It sounds very impressive, but means absolutely nothing. It's well known in the industry. You get a Big 4 in, they'll steal your watch to tell you the time, and you pay them millions for the favor. That's the old broken model of business transformation. If you're ready to move to the new model of business transformation, join me. My name is Heath Gascoigne, and I'm the author of this book, The Business Transformation Playbook: How to Implement Your Organization's Target Operating Model, TOM, and achieve a 0% failure rate using the 6-step Agile framework, HOBA, House of Business Architecture, that I created and have been using for over 15 years with my private clients, including the UK government, FTSE 100 companies and startups. I'm the guy the clients call to come in and set up and turn around their failing transformations. If you're a business owner, leader or manager, a change or transformation consultant, or you lead one, and you want to move to the new model of transformation, I'm holding a free 90-minute masterclass to get your 2023 year off to the best possible start with your transformation. Make sure you join me. You need to know where and how you're going wrong and what exactly you need to do and only do, not boiling the ocean trying to do everything, especially how to don't get caught in the interesting but useless documentation trap, and how to avoid joining the 70% that fail, but instead join the top 30% club that make business transformation a success first time, on time. Details how to register are below this video. Click the link below. Whether you're a beginner or an expert, we'll get you started.
Yes, yeah, this year I think it's as simple as best. Mine too, is that I'm yet to see that. We'll talk about high tech, next tech, big tech, all the sorts of tech you can get, and it's like, well, it's like the year 2000. I'm sorry, technical guys. You know, it's like the dot-com boom. You know, a lot of vaporware was brought out of that, and you know, they all they're all singing, all dancing system, and in reality, you didn't need that. And second, they didn't even deliver that. Yeah, so. Well, I have an experience of that same didn't even touch technology from a very similar example of the poor implementation at a recent HR transformation that I was called in to fix up and deliver after the second attempt. And I was told from the get-go that this system is off limits. You cannot touch it. It's there to stay, even though it had been the off-the-shelf, no customization, didn't match the business processes. It's, you know, people just complained about it and probably led to the high turnover in the HR system, because all now the queries, not on a system, came straight to whoever was available sitting next to the entrance in the HR department. They just got bamboozled with the amount of work they had. The turnover was like this. It was like 70+%. It's like unbelievable. And it was like, no, well, you can't touch the system. Well, the thing that seems to be hurting the organization the most is that system, and you can't touch it. I was going, okay, well, fine, we'll work around it. And then the workaround was, the starting the process seems to be go straight to the system. Well, how about this? How about go to a guidance paper that sits as on the internet as the entry to go to the process, but you've got to just read this cheat sheet first. Have you done these things before you start in the system? Because there's no workflow in it, which you thought there was, but you adopt it straight off the shelf, so there isn't. But it's fine. There is a way around it, but it's I like what you say. Is that the default to technology is not necessary. There are ways around it. I see with a lot of technology's got the talking stick, because that's where the budget's spent. And so we want to spend that money or flex our muscle and prove that we can play with our toys and produce beautiful things. But the usability is like, you know what? And that's like the emperor's new clothes, right? Someone has to call it out. But who's going to be the guy that calls it out?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good point. And you know, I try not to do a lot of tech bashing because technology has transformed the way we live. Right. So I don't want this to come across as never use technology. That's not the message here. It's I think the takeaway is it has to be done in the context of the entire system or organization. Yes. Right. And if it's not a complete solution, if it's just one-sided or one interest, then it's not going to work. Right. Yes. And that's the beautiful thing about organizations is you have to work together as a team, right? Yeah, all the pieces have to fit together. It's not just how well you do your job or the technology does its job.
Yeah.
We all have to work together to achieve that ultimate goal or why for our customers, right? And that's messy. And there's not a step-by-step guide that'll get you there. There's tools that we can use along the way, but you know, it's kind of a beautiful thing when you take a step back and look at it. It's kind of like relationships, right? There's no 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for marriages or other things, right? You got to work together.
Yes. Yeah. That's why I like these programs mostly for the people element. They're like by nature, people are change adverse. When you get them in a group, and particularly in the context of an organization, you know, the concept of groupthink comes in, where, you know, as one person doesn't want to change, what do you get when you've got an organization that doesn't want to change? So, whoa, there's, but then if you put the why in front of them, and even the best part, it's their own why that they created, or you might help lead them to their version of what the why they want. And that they get motivated. Go, if we can go from this current operating model, this current state and ways of working, which is quite painful, but we don't really want to change, to this future state that we can achieve this vision, and they do that change themselves. Like, you know, I've gone up and caught up with some previous clients, and I walk in the room and they kiss and hug me, and I was going, "Are you guys all right? What's going on?" And I said, our life now is just amazing. And I was going, well, hey, first of all, it was you guys did the work, right? That's why, and so I like, so yes, we'll get onto your approach, and I think yours is very similar to that. Is that you give them the tools and you show them the way, and they do the work, and it's like, and then they own it, and they really, you know, they talk about embedded change, right? Because most of the time, when the consultants come in, they deliver the change. Not long after, the back being called up again to fix what didn't stick. And so, well, it didn't stick because it wasn't embedded. Why wasn't it embedded? You know?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, you know, hiring a consultant, again, it's kind of like going to technology a little bit. It's like, oh, well, I need results fast, maybe, right? Is one of their motivations. And I don't want to mess with trying to get my internal organization to change. So I'm going to bring in someone else to help us do it. And it almost like emancipates leadership or the organization from actually owning it themselves sometimes. So I don't think it's all on the consultants for that mentality. I think it's, again, organizational changes have to happen as a system, right? And we all need to be, you know, playing to the same sheet of music. So yeah, our approach, what we prefer is to come in, give people some of the mindset.
So Jonathan, we're talking about point number 2 here, right? This is your approach that you follow. Yep. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
Correct. Yep. So going into an engagement. So yes, we seek to engage the organization to lead their own change, right? So we go in, typically we do like a 2-day workshop where we cover some of the fundamental things, like what is your goal? Let's get very specific on what you're trying to achieve. We give them a lot of mindset pieces, like assume that people are good. We've talked about that. We want to seek to have win-win solutions. A lot of other mindset pieces that just get them thinking differently, right? Expose them to some of these tools. And then we start digging into operations in that 2-day workshop. And again, we're teaching, they're applying with us, right? And creating their own future, right? And trying to achieve their own goals and objectives. And so we very much, you know, we're not going to assume, you know, the improvement, you know, need right? We're going to help them do it. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, we don't have any legitimate authority in the organization. So why you don't want us leading it anyways.
Yep.
But two is, people are good. They want to do it themselves. If given the right opportunities and skills and frameworks, then they're going to do it. Right. And they're going to want to do it. And that is how I think you can really make change management easy. Right.
Yeah.
Let them be the owners of their destiny. And we had a mindset at the last organization I worked for, the Texas Workforce Commission. We said, people who do the work are best equipped to improve the work.
Yeah. Okay. People who do the work are best equipped to do the work.
Yep. To improve the work. Because they have the intuition, right? They've been there, done that. They know how things really work, not what the SOP says, right? Not what the process map says, how things really work. They know the customers, right? They know what works and what doesn't, right? And so what we give them is just some different ways of thinking and a facilitated process to have them improve their own systems, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so that's how we start, right? Let's get together, let's engage the workforce, and we try to make sure that there's equal representation on that workshop team, right? Hopefully some frontline representation, some upper management, some middle management, the technology side, the legal side, whatever's important in that organization is represented. And then we go through a facilitated process to kind of work this through with them. Okay.
So have you found, I like the approach. I think I followed something similar, is that you've got to, I like that. Probably now I found the words about the people who do the work are the ones that should best ones would know how to improve the work. So I'm a big fan of we've got to go down to guys who are actually doing operations. Like current client, they'll have their design authority, and it's all from project people, and they're making decisions for the business. I said, who's from the business here? And they'll name what they call platform owners. And I said, but they actually are effectively product owners, technology product owners who actually sit under the technology organization. So there's no one from operations here. You're actually making decisions for the business. We need business people, not just the business people management, because they're too far from the pain. We got to get the guys that are in the pain. We'll work with them to draw out what that actually looks like, and then we'll prioritize those with leadership, management leadership, and then we'll come back for the design decision and how we're going to solve that. But if we've got people from project who are far removed, have never worked a day in the life in operations, then we'll tell you how that's going to end. It's like, come on, guys, we've got to be smarter than that. But have you found then where you're facilitating a workshop, and you've got the guys that are in the pain, and you've got the managers in the room, and they want to make a suggestion. But they feel like it's not their place, or they can't do it because they might get unfairly scrutinized, criticized, segregated from the group, because now they're being honest, and no one wants to, the emperor's new clothes. No one wants to say that.
Right. Absolutely. It happens all the time. Ideally, we create a space, and we kind of set some ground rules up front to say all opinions matter, right? And maybe not every idea is going to be implemented, but we should all feel safe to voice, honesty in these workshops. And so we try to create an environment where they are comfortable doing that, even if it's a reputational risk for them. But I think something you mentioned in your intro to the podcast is also true, is as a business transformationalist, you wear many hats, right? One is mediator.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's not uncommon for those people to come up during the break, right? Or email us afterwards, or do these things and say, I wasn't quite comfortable sharing this, but I want you to know this is what really happens. Right.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So, so there's different ways that can be shared, and you have to treat that with
discernment,
with care,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because now the real truth that maybe wasn't shared, and you got to kind of figure out a way to make that known, or that voice heard in a workshop.
Yeah. I've had some situations there where you get told there's things you're not supposed to know, or that's not public knowledge. But when I talking about negotiator, when I met the COO prior to this recent engagement. And so we met up, and he said, so tell me, I'm not clear on what you actually do. What will you actually do? And I explained it to him, and then he said, so I've worked it out. So this is what you do. You're the horse whisperer to the executive team. And I said, well, if that's how you want to put it, yeah. So it's like, okay, we've got a structure and a process, but there's a people element, right? And you've got to talk to their, whatever their motivation is or their pain is, but in a language that I talk about in transformation, there's the 3 L's. There's levels, language, and layers. You've got the levels in the organization, strategic, operations, and project. You've got language. Each one of them speaks a different language, talking market share, reputation on the top, and ops are talking about turnover and widgets and cost of goods sold, etc. And then down in technology or projects, you're talking about code and a level of detail, quite high, medium, and very detailed. And so when you're having these conversations with different stakeholders, it's like normal presenting, right? You've got to understand your audience. Yeah. So once you understand your audience, you talk to the right level of language and detail to where they are sitting and what's in terms of context. Context is key, right?
Absolutely. And imagine, as the leader, you got to put all those puzzle pieces together. Wow, what a job, right? What a job that our executive leaders have to do to bring the voices together. And so that's a good segue into the actual approaches that we use in our workshops and our engagements that I'd love to share with you if we have time.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, fire away, man. Fire away.
So we primarily use the theory of constraints. This is a little lesser known methodology. Back in the 70s and 80s, it gained a lot of momentum. Dr. Ellie Goldratt is the founder of the methodology, and he wrote a book.
Ellie
Goldratt, Goldratt. Ellie Goldratt.
Okay. Very constraints. So great.
He had an interesting background. He was a physicist, so he viewed the world through a physicist's eye. And a lot of these concepts actually apply to manufacturing environments, to organizations as well. And so he started the theory of constraints methodology, and he wrote a book called The Goal that I would encourage. The Goal. Okay. It's pretty popular here in the US. A lot of business schools prescribe it to students. But I would encourage you guys to take a look at it and read it.
I'll put that in the show notes. Lovely. Thank you.
So the theory of constraints is a very focused and pragmatic methodology. So in that methodology, there's something called the 5 focusing steps. Okay. And so it's all about how do I, as a leader, put all the puzzle pieces together to achieve my goal? That's exactly what this methodology is about. So, if we view the world as complex, we will create complex solutions.
Yeah.
Right.
So
we want.
So go ahead to quote you on that. Yeah. If you view the world as complex, you will create. And I think a lot of organizations are we call them symptoms of that. They think their life is overcomplicated, and they're complicated solution.
Absolutely. And in that example you gave earlier, like the technology people were worried about code and the business people were all worried about customer impact. This is all good things, right? This is what they know, right? But the question is, how do we get us all working together to solve the right problems that achieve our goal? And that's how you can create focus in an organization, right? And so the 5 focusing steps, let me go over them really quick, and then I'll tell you an example that illustrates this. So the first focusing step is identify your constraint.
Okay.
So a constraint, the simplest version of this in an organization is like, think of a manufacturing environment, like a floor, right? Where there's a physical manufacturing process. A lot of people call them bottlenecks, right? Where work piles up in one spot. Typically is, that's a constraint, right? It's something in the business process that is setting the pace of everything else in the system, right? And so in a physical environment, it's much easier to see this. The problem is most of the world is now in a digital space, is now in a non-physical space, right? And so it's much harder to see where the work is and how well it's flowing through our organizations, right? So identify the constraint. Really quick example is if I'm part of a process and I pass work off to you, Heath, if I can do 10 units an hour and you can do 5 units an hour, does it make any sense for me to do 10 and send you 10? Probably not, because you can only do 5.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's all about dependencies in our organization operationally. Right. And so we need to know what is the weakest link of our business process.
Yes.
Because that's where improvement matters. So let's go back to that example. I can do 10 units an hour, whatever that is, right? If it's making widgets or it's advising clients or whatever your work is, right? I can do 10 an hour. You can do 5. If I improve, I go through a transformation. I can do 12 units an hour now, but you can still only do 5. We're still only going to produce 5 an hour as an organization.
Yeah.
Right.
It's at least.
It really matters where you improve. Right. And so the 5 focusing steps teaches us you need to improve at your constraint, right? In the operation, where the resource or the step in the process that is setting the pace of everything else. Okay. So that's the first focusing step. So that right there already reduced the scope of where we need to improve by like 90%, right? We don't need to do any of this. We don't need to improve upstream of the constraint or even downstream right now. We need to focus right at that spot that's dictating the pace of this organization, right? Yep. So that's the focusing step number 1. Number 2 is called exploit the constraint. This is a kind of a harsh word, but it basically means make sure that step is as productive as they can be, right? Yep. If I sat down with you, Heath, if you're the constraint, which by the way, I'm the constraint in a lot of things that we do. So don't take it personally out there if you're the constraint. If I go to sit next to your desk and I notice, gosh, Heath is really battling his technology today. Man, he's getting interrupted all the time. People calling him and he can't focus. Man, the way he's getting sent work, I'm noticing that he has to send it back a lot up in the organization. So gosh, it turns out that only 50% of your time is actually value adding work. Right. And so the second focusing step is go and make sure that constrained resource or step in the process is as productive as possible. Right. Whatever that means, right? If they're doing rework, and then the third step, this is what's most important and what also aligns the organization. The third step is called subordinate everything else to the organization. So what this means is everyone in the organization has a role in making sure you and your job go well, Heath, if you're the constraint. So if I'm sending you work, I need to make sure I'm sending you stuff that is ready to be worked. Right.
All right. Yep.
I need to be sending you enough work, but not overwhelming you. Right. This is a mature operational system. I'm managing the system by managing around my constraint. So this is called subordination.
Subordination.
Yep. Okay. It's the third step.
All right. Okay. So everything that makes sense. Everything around, it's almost like putting in cotton buds or cotton wool rather, around protecting that constraint, but you're actually not protecting it. You're clearing the way for that constraint, like unblocking a block drain, breaking out that the block and allowing the water to flow. So,
yes. Yeah. Exactly. And and like the analogy of a highway is a good one, right? We all have local highway systems, and there's always like that one spot that just always bottlenecks, it's always slows down and all these things. Well, that's very similar to a constraint in an organization. Often it happens when lanes, collapse and other things, and the capacity of that spot is just lower. Right. And so it doesn't matter if you put a 5-lane highway in earlier. In fact, you're probably going to make it worse. You're trying to jam more and more cars into that one spot, right?
Yep.
Right. And so, this happens in organizations all the time.
So subordinate everything around the constraint.
So everything operationally, but also, from a leadership perspective, from a technology perspective, how is your technology implementation affecting the lives of the frontline staff who are the constraint, right? Is a huge question with technology implementations, right? Is your piece of technology going to impact the most constrained resource in the organization in a positive way? If you can demonstrate that, then you're going to be, you're going to be like wildly successful, right? That 70% transformation failure rate is going to reduce drastically, right? If you can address that. The fourth step is called elevate the constraint. So this just simply means add more resources.
Okay.
add more resources if you need to meet demand, right? Whatever that is.
Okay.
Typically, we start with more resources, right? This is like my mentor calls it the seductive 7. She calls it, and I'll have to send you a link afterwards.
Yeah. Okay.
But these are like
7.
These are 7 techniques that organizations typically run to first without really understanding what the problem is. Okay. So one of them is more resources, right? Yes. Can't tell you how many times people just say, I just need more staff, you know? I just need more staff. And
I hear the throw more money or bodies and or both at the problem. So, well, that's not all. You know, we were successful, but you forgot to say that we threw doubled the budget and threw a lot more money and a lot more people. Well, that's you're successful. If you didn't have the money, you wouldn't have been.
Yep. And so we just have the principle of like, let's make sure you're doing good with the resources you have first, and then let's talk about adding resources, right? Okay. And so that is the 4th step, though. If you've done those previous steps, right, you're managing the system, you're subordinating to the constraint of the operation, right? If you're doing these things and you still are not meeting demand, right, for the organization, other things, you can elevate it. I mean, more resources are sometimes needed.
Yep. Okay.
And then lastly, the last focusing step is it's a cycle of continuous improvement. So it just means go back to step 1, right? Continuously improve and be going through this cycle, because often the resource constraint can move, right? And we see that. But I want to give you an analogy to kind of like implement this, because this sounds kind of foreign, or maybe it even sounds too simple, right? To some of your listeners out there. So take the analogy of a doctor's office. Which resource in a doctor's office do you think is the constraint? Typically,
the receptionist.
It seems like it sometimes, right? But typically, well, I'll phrase it this way: are we often waiting for the doctor, or is the doctor often waiting for us as patients?
Good one. Yeah, from my experience, I would be waiting for the doctor. And there'd be a lot of people in the same situation in the waiting room waiting for the doctor. And so the doctor's a constraint.
I think you nailed it. At least where I live, that's the same story. And maybe it's different because we have different healthcare systems, right? So maybe some of you guys aren't waiting on doctors so much, but a lot of us are, right? And that's because they're a very expensive resource, right? We can't have a lot of extra doctors laying around, right? They're a highly trained, very expensive resource, right? And they're also, by the way, the resource that this system is designed for, right? They're the people adding value to the customer, right? Yes. I don't go to the doctor because I get checked in or get billed, for heaven's sake, right? I go to the doctor to get treated, right? And to be assessed and treated by a doctor. And so they're the constraint typically of a, an office, a healthcare system, right? And so we can improve in many different ways, but if we're not actually improving the job of the doctor doing the diagnosing and treating, we're not really improving anything, are we? Right?
Same.
And so that's why there are people who check in and make sure that, all the records are ready for the doctor, right, to review. That's why there's a nurse practitioner who, checks your vitals and everything, so the doctor doesn't have to do that. Right. So that you can maximize your time with the doctor to do what you're there for.
Those other supporting resources. Which would be, to your point there of elevate the constraint by put things around them. So help the doctor out so that he has to do less work. Like to the earlier point about when you give the work that's ready to be done. Right. Because that's the subordinate everything.
If you're not the constraint, your job is to make sure that step in the process goes well. Whatever you do, right? Whatever you do, what are you doing that allows that part of the process to go well? And we typically want the constraint to be, again, that part in the process where true customer value is delivered, right? The doctor in the doctor's office, the investigator in an investigation operation, the counselor in a social services environment, right? We want to be managing the system in a way that makes their job go well, because they're the front line. They're the ones that are actually delivering value to a customer. Right.
Okay. So in case the listeners missed that is that the improvement is in ideally in the place where you add the most value to the customer. Not
That's
because it's the nice place to do the improvement because of whether you're a technology guy and you could make us no, but in the specific place. So you get real return.
Perfectly said. And sometimes, there is actually a difference. We're getting into some nuances here. This is awesome. There's a difference between a bottleneck and a constraint, right? So maybe there's a bottleneck in the doctor's office at the intake phase because it's a new person and, they're not having a good day or whatever, right? People can't get checked in, but there's only typically one true constraint in an organization, one resource that's going to be setting the pace for the entire system, right? And that's the doctor, right? So we want the thing that we're managing the system around to be where that value is delivered. And that's what we want to manage around. You might have to address some bottlenecks up front or downstream or whatever, but you want to be managing around where the value is created.
That raises a good point about, if there's been, I've been recently in a previous client helping them and they've just had a restructure and they've let go a third of the organization. And I'm coming up with target operating model as they've asked and working with both the project team and the organization. And then it looks like that we need to increase the headcount. And they said, no, you can't do that. I said, why is that? They said, oh no, they just let go a third of the organization. We can't be talking about rehiring again. They just got rid of it. I said, hey, I know these conversations that we are now going to touch upon might feel or be uncomfortable, but we need to have this conversation. It's like if you don't talk about it, and it's all it doesn't get done. Well, if you don't talk about it in these transformations, we're never going to transform.
Yeah, the sacred cows, we call them, right? Some of these things are just like
the sacred cow. That's a great one.
It's like these things in the organizations. Oh, we just don't talk about that. You have to. That's a mindset piece, right? We have to be humble enough to know that maybe there's a different way out there. Maybe we haven't tried everything that we can, or we have to kind of suspend what we know sometimes to be able to see past that and to see where true transformation can happen. And I think this is the advantage of being an outside consultant is these people have all the intuition and a lot of knowledge and they probably know what they need to do, but they need an outsider to come in as fresh eyes and say, this is what's really happening or this is what's really, what you should do, because they're just so in the day to day, they can't see that perspective.
They are, which I would say, they could not see the forest for the trees.
There we go. I've heard that.
We could write a whole book on quotes and cliches on the school. I tell you what. Yeah. Okay, so that was that's the process that you follow, and then what was the key elements? What were the key elements that you look for when coming in? Whether they've got it. Oh shit, look, they don't have it and we've got to get this. And, if we don't, I'll tell you what it's going to look like in 6 months, 12 months time. What was it you look for on these programs? If they don't have it, how do you get it?
Good. Really great question. So there's a couple of things that I would say, if these things are in place, then we make much greater and faster progress, right?
Yeah.
And if they're not in place, then it takes a lot longer and we have to address and recommend and coach and advise and do these things, right? So one is that, and we've talked about many of these already, but just to kind of touch on them again, is I think it requires an organization to have a leadership who can ensure focus on the things that really, truly matter.
Yep.
So as I was saying, a unique challenge in the government space is that there are so many people trying to tell the function how to do their jobs.
Yeah.
And so you have to have leadership who is able to hold back the 1,000 things that the organization could do and focus on the things that truly matter. Yeah. Right. And there's a quote by Steve Jobs, and he says something, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he says something like, I'm most proud of the things that I didn't approve or I didn't commission, right? The things that I shot down at Apple.
Yeah.
As much so as the things that I drove forward. Right. And I think there's sort of I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard like on his first day back at Apple, after he went back, he slashed like at least half of the development projects right away, just cut them.
Whoa.
because he knew that he had to get the organization to focus on the products that truly mattered, which at the time were, Apple computers and probably even the iPhone and other things that transformed the world we live in today. And so I think it takes leadership to hold back and be that gatekeeper for the organization to ensure focus, which is an incredibly challenging thing.
Okay, so the leadership, strong leadership, and that focus element again. It's like, so listeners, if you're in the situation here, and I for focus on the programs that I'm at, and it applies at the program level, if even at the higher portfolio program and project level, is one fundamental thing, and that's what I think what the theme what we're saying here is focus. And for me, it's focus. Instead of getting away from the aspirational, or I'm big on vision, but vision is almost like a dream. If you don't have a plan, it's like goals. If there's no plan, it's just a dream. And it's like a vision. If there's no strategy on how you're going to get there, then you're not going to achieve your vision. But how do you know you've executed or going towards your vision? That you've got objectives of every strategy, and then you've got measures of every of those objectives, so you can clearly articulate what good looks like, your progress towards it, and when you've got there. So I'm big on the focus. You got to that's key at all levels throughout the organization.
Absolutely. Focus is. I don't know how. Again, I've never been a top level executive in a huge organization, but I don't know how you would do your job unless you'd had focus.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that's key. And I would say the second thing I would advocate for, Heath, is a focus on operations. So we touched on this a little bit. We need to realize that operations is where value is delivered for our customer. Right. Even in technology allows the organization and the operation to do their job in ways they never were able to before. But at the end of the day, operations is how you deliver that. Right.
Absolutely.
And so it's again, that concept of subordination. If you're not operations, your job is to make the operations go as well as they can.
Yes. Okay. I'm a big fan on the ops. I love it. That is where that one, I like what you said there, that where the value is delivered. And that's, partly when we talk about these change projects and your stakeholders and you have on the project, and, I'm a big fan of that. You've got to get the people closest, and to your words there about closest to the pain. It's like you are those people that do the work, the best people to know how to improve the work. It's like you've got to get the people from operations, and I think that's missed. Again, for the listeners in the context, Jonathan is in Texas, and in the biggest state in the States, in America, another continent, this part of the world, but the symptoms of what works and doesn't work on these transformation programs are the same. And so what Jonathan's just described there about the focus on operations is like, operations is exactly where the value is driven. Now, we've got a business capability model, as most organizations do, and map their processes to the capabilities. And I'm a big fan of the capability model, because then from a capabilities perspective, you can see, you can cost everything. Your people, the people, the headcount, cost, the process, what's carried out, the inputs, what's generated, what the outputs, cost and revenue, the technology and data. So you've got your strategic level, your tier, you've got operations, and then you've got supporting. And so I've picked up the capability model at the current client. And I said, look, with this, we're going to massage it a little to align to where these actually people sit in the organization, is where they will sit, where these will dictate where they sit in the capability model. And so they've got currently technology sitting in operations. And I'm going, unless you're in the business of selling technology, then yes, technology is in operations. But I think technology is a supporting function, supporting the operations. And technology, of course, because of the previous owners of the capability model, they are starting to, I can see the bit of resistance here. So, to that same point, where value is provided is in operations. So which part from technology do you sit facing customers giving value? You don't. You support the people in the business doing it. And so, for what happens there is, when we start talking about committing resources, and we go, we're going to put it all into operations. Well, and then it all goes to technology. So, you're not actually committing any money to operations. It's all going to technology. And then you wonder when the business is struggling, say, because you're not being honest, and there's honest conversations again. So you've, for whatever reason, ego, or you like sitting in the middle. You don't want to be, you couldn't be strategic, so you couldn't sell that one. But you don't like the idea of being a supporting function. It's not very cool, or it's uncomfortable for you. So, but those part of the conversations, right?
Absolutely, and also not to demean non-operational people. You allow, and you manifest your value through operations. So it's not to say your job doesn't matter. It just means that's where it's delivered, right? And that should be our orientation. And technology can be an incredible magnifier of value, right, through operations if we wield it correctly. One more story, Heath. I'm sorry, I'm full of stories.
But love it, man. Love it.
This is a good sort of summary, story to kind of put it all together. But I once was the lead consultant in a team that made an $8 billion change improvement.
Whoa.
$8 billion it was I can't reveal too much about the operation itself, but essentially the change that we made, and it was, there's many changes, there was all sorts of technology companies knocking on our door, trying to help us, meet the demand at the time. We did use technology, but it was a very simple form of technology that helped us make this change. What was happening was it was a manual, this operation required a manual step in the process to initiate an investigation for fraud. Okay. It was a person had to say, yes, this looks like fraud. I'm going to open an investigation. Problem was, when demand grew by 700%, there wasn't enough people to hit the open an investigation button. Right. And so we, using technology, we're able to create some criteria to automatically open fraud investigations if they trip certain things, right? And so we had to use technology, and we used advanced data analytics to do these predictive indicators, right? But at the end of the day, it was a very simple piece of technology that, because it addressed the resource constraint in the operation, which was the investigator, it had drastic improvement and prevented billions of dollars in fraud. So technology is essential, but it paired with operations and in the right context, solving the right problems.
So for our technology colleagues out there, it's not, it's like I had to explain to a colleague just earlier today, actually, is that it's not good or bad where you sit on the capability model. That's not the purpose of the hierarchy. There's no hierarchy in a capability model. It's just where people sit. But to the point is, don't feel like you're adding less value or of no value. It is of you're in service of the outcome. And that outcome is to deliver value, and it just happens to be in operations.
Absolutely.
Okay. So that was your 5 steps of the five elements of what you look forward to. So just wrap that, summarize that one there for you. So you exploit the constraint. That's so you inspect it to make it, aim to make it more effective. You subordinate everything around it, so that this is where when you're ready to hand on the work is ready. So you remove the bottleneck. So there's one of about operationally, leadership, and technically is that you want to use technology in a positive way to clear that constraint. And that specific constraint. Like I've been on projects where they want to just deliver technology. It's like, well, for what purpose are you delivering that technology? So that's a question. I think a common theme, we've got focus is a consistent theme, but also I think we mentioned it earlier about the question. Like, don't be afraid to question. Question everything. Then the number 4 was alleviate the constraint. So add more resources. But you've got to be not just add any resources. Like I've been, I gave that example of programs I've been on, and they say they're successful, but you just threw a shitload of money and resources at it, and really the return on investment is, it's a sunk cost. You've lost money on this transformation because it cost you too much. You're best off have not done it. You could have not done the whole program, lived with the pain, been cheaper than you're doing the program. Yeah.
It happens. I mean, in government, we don't quite have that profit sort of lens a lot of the time. And so, sometimes it's just as many resources as possible. It doesn't matter what the efficiency looks like, right? Where we want to have a win-win, right? We want to meet public demand, but also be more efficient.
Yeah. I think unfortunately, the public sector maybe unfairly maybe over scrutinized because they have so many oversight bodies looking at them, and that they're unlike private companies where they have the private unlisted companies where they have maybe the ownership maybe of not having to disclose it, but from a public sector perspective, they have external audit. They have like here in the UK, they have the National Audit Office, the NAO, and they do regular inspections into big programs of work, and they publish the results. And those results are, they're known. And then, of course, when they're published, they also get discussed in Parliament. And once they're in Parliament, they're in the news, and then it becomes a headline. And then people, everyone scrutinises it. But had that same scrutiny been applied to the private sector, if they also disclosed what was happening, they might not fare as well also.
Yeah, it's a tough environment to succeed in. Lots of oversight, lots of reporting, lots of other things. But again, the people who are in these environments, and so even if you're listening today and you think, oh, I don't know what any of this means to me, I'm in the private sector. Well, you probably know someone who's in the public sector, and if you don't, you've been interacting with it in some form or fashion in your life, right? And so we all interact with this. So even if your takeaway today, by the way, all these principles are developed for the private sector. We just applied them in the public sector. So I hope they're applicable to you. But even if not, grab the person who's in the public sector, right? And let them watch this podcast. Reach out to me. We're mission driven, right? So we're very inclusive into my community and helping each other out because it's for the greater good.
Oh, yes.
So it's a good reminder there, Heath.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the last one, number 5 of the 5 elements you look forward to is the cycle of continuous improvement, which is to go back to step 1 for to continuously improve. Because as you said, the constraints always move. And that's I like to see when we talk about a delivery framework or process, and the last one is continuous improvement. Okay, these guys have done it before, they know what's going to happen. The time we get to, like I tell the guys on these programs, by the time we get like 6 months down the track, and that's why we do current state assessment, so we just baseline it. Because in 6 months' time, even though we're probably not going to deliver for another 6, you won't be able to remember what the business looked like 6 months ago. So,
yeah, exactly. Our environments constantly change.
Yeah.
Right. And this is the challenge with complexity and doing these mega huge projects that take 5 years. Your whole external environment is going to change before you can even implement that. Right. And so we always need to be knowing where we need to improve and not letting inertia become our constraint. Right. Is another thing is even if we've solved the problem, you can keep going. Right. Continue to push the envelope, continue to see how you can improve because why not? Right. Don't just sit around waiting for the next crisis to happen.
Oh, yep. Yeah, I'm a big believer I talk about in terms of maturity models and your continuous improvement. It's okay, now you've done it and you've got good at it. You've got a level of maturity. These transformations may take a different guise, but you're going to go through the same process. You're going to transform HR and finance, but you're still doing the same process. So you be in your best interest to get good at it. The continuous improvement is a big one. So good one on that. And I like, we've got a couple of quotes, like I'll quote you two, probably, I've got about a year's worth of quotes there. The sacred cow. We've talked about the difference between a bottleneck and the constraints. And your 3 key elements. One was leadership, focus where it really truly matters. You quoted Steve Jobs, which he's proud of what he didn't improve. I quote Steve Jobs from this perspective of, we always got to, you can't work out, paraphrase real badly, is that, find the problem before the solution. Like he talked about that, don't try and build it and then try to sell it. And he's got the scars to prove it. It's like, so that's like, okay, guys, if we know that, why do you continually want to go to the end and build the solution without understanding the problem?
Yeah. Wow. That's a really good perspective to have. And you think about the products that he developed. I mean, that was true, right? I mean, he wasn't just iteratively developing something. He was creating new innovations that addressed customer needs or desires, right, in a way that no one had done before. That's really a good point.
Yeah. And then do you like to, number 2 is you focus on operations, listeners, you're listening to that, operations, not technology, not strategy. We've got to get out of the clouds for the 25,000 foot vision statement. That's very nice and aspirational, but we've got to get down to reality, the pragmatic part that you talked about earlier about actually where, and I think your third part of adding value where you deliver value, like for the technology part specifically, is that although in my capability model that they wouldn't be sitting in ops, but and supporting, is when we focus on change, you focus on change where you add the most value. And everyone plays a role in adding that value. You may not be directly delivering that value yourself, but you should not discount your role that you play. You play in that process.
Well said.
Awesome. Jonathan, my man, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much. So for you guys, the listeners, you've heard it here first from a true transformation, one practitioner, an expert, and from the other side of the world, and from America and the States and Texas, the biggest state, which is like probably the size of the country that I'm from New Zealand, is, the symptoms of what we talked about and some great tips there. There's the 7 steps and the 3 elements you look forward to for getting on a project. The really good stuff. So we've got some show notes there, some books you talked about. We'll get the links, we'll add them in there. In the show notes, we'll put how to contact Jonathan, and how we've got the value, the mission, purpose-driven organization that he's in. So if you're in the States, it's not just limited to the States, right? You guys work remotely all around the world. That get in touch with Jonathan. You'll have his details in the show notes. You reach out to him at any time.
Heath, thank you so much for the platform. You've got a wonderful show here and a wonderful company. Thank you for the opportunity. And I have to correct you on one thing, though. Unfortunately, Texas is not the biggest state geographically, although we think we are. I think Alaska is the biggest, but but our heads are big enough that we think we're the biggest state. So that's the only correction in your eloquent summary there, sir. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, my friend. Okay, look out for this. We're coming out in maybe a few days' time, but maybe longer. Get the podcast manager on it, and I'll tag you. You can do what you like with it. Share it to make sure your friends and network. Once again, Jonathan, thank you very much for your time and your humbling, which I said from the start that so far the guys on the podcast have been in my network on LinkedIn, and they undervalue the contribution value that they bring. And as you've just seen here, ladies and gentlemen, my God, mate, it was an honor and a privilege. Thank you very much for sharing your insights.
Thank you, Heath. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Okay. Thank you very much, buddy.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.